The wagon wheel shattered beneath Clara Owens as the desert sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trail outside Val Verde, New Mexico territory, and she knew immediately that her already desperate situation had just become dire. She climbed down from the broken wagon, her body aching from weeks of travel, and surveyed the damage with mounting panic. The wheel was beyond repair, splintered into useless pieces scattered across the rocky ground. Her water supply was dangerously low, her food nearly gone, and the nearest settlement was still miles away through terrain she did not know. Clara was 22 years old and had been traveling alone since leaving Santa Fe, fleeing a past that had marked her in ways both visible and invisible. The afternoon heat was oppressive, shimmering waves rising from the red earth and rocky outcroppings that dotted the landscape. She pulled her bonnet lower over her face, feeling the familiar tightness of the scars that ran across her back, a constant reminder of the cruelty she had endured. Those scars were the reason she had left everything behind, the reason she could not bear the whispers and pitying glances any longer. Clara began unhitching her horse, a gentle mare named Daisy, when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her heart raced as she reached for the small pistol she kept hidden in her skirts, her hands trembling. Out here, alone and vulnerable, any stranger could mean danger. The rider who emerged from behind a cluster of juniper trees was unlike any man Clara had ever seen. He sat astride a massive roan stallion, his broad shoulders blocking out the sun as he approached. He had long dark hair that fell past his shoulders, a thick beard and arms corded with muscle that were visible beneath his worn buckskin shirt. His eyes, she noticed as he drew closer, were a striking shade of blue that seemed to see everything. "You look like you could use some help, madam," he called out, his voice deep and rough but not unkind. He kept his distance as if sensing her fear. Clara kept her hand near her pistol. "My wheel broke. I can manage." The man dismounted with easy grace despite his size, which Clara now realized was considerable. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with muscles that spoke of years of hard living in the wilderness. "Name's Porter Dalton. I live up in the mountains, but I come through this way sometimes to trade in Val Verde. That wheel is not something you can fix alone, and the sun will be setting in a few hours. These trails are not safe after dark." "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Dalton, but I will find a way," Clara said, her voice steady despite her fear. She had learned the hard way that accepting help from strange men often came with a price. Porter studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand you do not know me from Adam, and you have no reason to trust me. But the fact remains that you are stranded out here with a broken wagon, limited supplies, and night coming on. There are mountain lions in these parts, not to mention men who are far more dangerous. I have a camp about an hour's ride from here. You are welcome to shelter there while I fix your wagon, or I can escort you into Val Verde if you would prefer. Either way, I cannot in good conscience leave you out here alone." Clara looked at the broken wheel, then at the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. She had heard stories about the dangers of the New Mexico territory, about bandits and wild animals. This man, despite his intimidating size, had kind eyes. Something in his manner put her slightly at ease, though she remained cautious. "If you could escort me to Val Verde, I would be grateful," she said finally. Porter shook his head. "Val Verde is 6 hours away on horseback, and that is if you know the shortcuts. We would not make it before full dark, and I meant what I said about these trails. My camp is closer and safer. I give you my word that you will not be harmed." The sincerity in his voice made Clara's decision for her. She nodded slowly. "Very well, thank you." Porter moved to help her gather her essential belongings from the wagon. He worked efficiently, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he handled her things. When he reached for a trunk, Clara quickly moved to stop him. "I can carry that," she said, too quickly. Porter paused, reading something in her reaction. "As you wish, madam." He loaded her other items onto his horse and helped her secure the trunk to Daisy's saddle. Then he surprised her by pulling out his canteen and offering it to her. "You look like you could use some water. Drink as much as you need. I have plenty at camp." The water was cool and sweet, better than anything Clara had tasted in days. She drank deeply, feeling some of her strength return. They set off, Porter leading the way on his stallion while Clara followed on Daisy. He took them through a winding path that climbed gradually into the foothills, where the air was slightly cooler and pinon pines provided occasional shade. He spoke little, but occasionally pointed out landmarks or warned her of loose rocks. As they rode, Clara found herself studying him. He moved like someone completely at home in this harsh landscape, reading the land as easily as she might read a book. There was a quiet competence about him that was reassuring, and she realized with some surprise that her initial fear was fading. Porter's camp was nestled in a small canyon with a clear spring bubbling from between the rocks. He had built a sturdy lean-to for shelter, and a fire pit ringed with stones. The area was clean and well organized, not at all what Clara had expected from a mountain man living alone. "It is not much, but it serves," Porter said as he helped her dismount. "You can sleep in the lean-to. I will bed down out here by the fire." "I could not ask you to give up your shelter," Clara protested. "You are not asking, I am offering." His tone left no room for argument, but it was not unkind. "I will get the fire going and make us some supper. There is a spot behind those rocks where you can wash up if you would like, and the spring water is safe to drink." Clara accepted gratefully, taking her small bag and heading to the private area he had indicated. She washed the dust from her face and hands, feeling more human than she had in days. When she returned, Porter had a fire crackling and was preparing what looked like rabbit stew in a Dutch oven. They ate in companionable silence as the stars began to appear overhead. The food was simple but delicious, seasoned with herbs that Porter must have gathered from the surrounding hills. Clara found herself relaxing despite her circumstances, lulled by the warmth of the fire and the peaceful sounds of the desert evening. "What brings you out here alone, if you do not mind my asking?" Porter said after they had finished eating. "Val Verde is not exactly on the main routes." Clara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I am heading to California. Val Verde was meant to be a stopping point." "That is a long journey for a woman alone," he observed, not judgmentally, just stating a fact. "I had my reasons for leaving." Clara looked down at her hands. "Sometimes staying in one place becomes impossible." Porter did not press further, seeming to understand that some stories needed time to be told. "I came out here 5 years ago," he offered instead. "Got tired of people and their ways. Out here, life is hard but honest. A man knows where he stands. Do you ever get lonely?" The question was out before Clara could stop it. Porter looked at her across the fire, his blue eyes reflecting the flames. "Sometimes. But loneliness is better than being around people who make you feel alone, even when you are standing right next to them." Clara felt those words resonate deep in her chest. That was exactly how she had felt back in Santa Fe, surrounded by people who whispered behind her back, who looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I understand that feeling," she said quietly. They talked late into the night, sharing stories carefully edited to avoid the painful parts. Porter told her about tracking deer through the mountains, about finding ancient pottery shards left by peoples who had lived here long ago, about the changing seasons in this harsh but beautiful land. Clara told him about books she had read, about her love of gardens and growing things, about the stars she had learned to navigate by during her journey. When exhaustion finally claimed her, Porter showed her to the lean-to, which he had prepared with clean blankets and a rolled-up coat for a pillow. "Sleep well, Clara. You are safe here." And somehow, despite everything, she believed him. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. The morning air was cool and fresh, and for a moment she forgot where she was. Then memory returned and she sat up, smoothing her dress and hair as best she could. Outside, Porter was tending the fire, cooking breakfast with the same efficient competence he brought to everything. "Morning," he said when he saw her emerge. "Hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," Clara admitted. It was true. Despite the strange surroundings, she had felt safe enough to truly rest. After breakfast, Porter saddled his horse. "I am going to ride back to your wagon and see what I can salvage. There is a man in Val Verde who makes wheels. I will take the measurements and see about getting you fixed up. You should stay here where it is safe." "How long will you be gone?" Clara tried to keep the anxiety out of her voice. "Most of the day, I expect. But you have nothing to fear here. Keep the fire going and there is plenty of food and water. If anyone should come by, which I doubt, you have that pistol of yours, though I do not think you will need it." Clara nodded, and Porter swung up into his saddle. He looked down at her, his expression serious. "I will be back before dark, I promise." She watched him ride away, feeling strangely bereft. Then she shook herself. She had work to do. She could not simply sit idle all day. Clara spent the morning exploring the camp and the immediate area. She found wild herbs growing near the spring and recognized several that could be used for cooking or medicine. She gathered some and brought them back to camp, hanging them to dry near the lean-to. Then she turned her attention to the camp itself, which, while clean, had the unmistakable air of a place where only a man lived. She washed Porter's few dishes and cooking pots, mended a tear she found in one of his shirts that was hanging from a peg, and organized his supplies more efficiently. It felt good to be useful, to have tasks to occupy her hands and mind. As the afternoon wore on, Clara found herself thinking about Porter Dalton. He was so different from any man she had known. There was a gentleness to him despite his imposing size, a respect in the way he spoke to her and looked at her. He had not stared at her or made her feel uncomfortable. He had not demanded explanations or pried into her business. He had simply offered help when she needed it, asking nothing in return. The sun was beginning to set when she heard hoofbeats. Clara felt a rush of relief when she recognized Porter's massive frame on his stallion. He was leading Daisy behind him, and Clara's trunk and belongings were secured to the mare's saddle. "Wagon was too damaged to repair," Porter said as he dismounted. "I salvaged what I could and buried the rest. The wheel maker in Val Verde can have a new wheel ready in 3 days, but without a wagon, it does not do you much good." Clara felt her heart sink. "I see. Then I suppose I need to buy a new wagon somehow." Porter began unsaddling his horse, not looking at her. "Wagons are expensive." "Do you have funds for that?" "Some," Clara said, though in truth her money was running dangerously low. The journey had cost more than she had anticipated. "There is another option," Porter said carefully. "You could stay here for a while. I could use some help, and you could work off your room and board while you figure out your next steps. When you are ready to move on, I will take you to Val Verde or wherever you need to go." Clara stared at him. "You would do that? Let me stay here." "I would not offer if I did not mean it." Porter finally looked at her, his blue eyes steady. "I know you do not know me well, but I give you my word that you would be safe. I respect you, Clara, and I would never do anything to harm you or make you uncomfortable." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that Clara recognized as genuine. She thought about her options. She could go to Val Verde with very little money, try to find work in a town where she knew no one, face the inevitable questions and stares. Or she could stay here in this peaceful canyon with a man who had shown her nothing but kindness. "I accept," she said, "but I insist on earning my keep. I am a hard worker." Porter's face broke into a smile, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his rugged features. "I do not doubt that for a second." Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Porter taught Clara the rhythms of mountain life. She learned to recognize animal tracks, to find edible plants, to read the weather in the sky and wind. In return, she brought order and comfort to his camp. She cooked meals that were more elaborate than his simple bachelor fare, using the herbs she had gathered and game he hunted. She mended his clothes, organized his supplies, and even convinced him to let her cut his hair, though not too short. They talked constantly, sharing stories and thoughts they had never shared with anyone else. Porter told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to fever, about the brother who had died in the war. Clara found herself opening up in ways she never had before, telling him about her love of learning, her dreams of having a garden of her own someday, her fondness for poetry. But she did not tell him about her scars. That secret remained locked away, hidden beneath the high-necked dresses she always wore, even in the heat. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Clara had come to stay with Porter, she was washing clothes in the spring when she heard voices. Male voices, rough and loud, coming from the direction of the camp. Her heart seized with fear. Porter had gone hunting and was not due back for another hour. She crept closer, staying hidden behind the rocks. 3 men had ridden into camp and they were going through Porter's things. They were dirty and hard-looking, with the air of men who lived outside the law. "Mountain Man has himself a nice setup here," one of them said, his voice carrying clearly. "Wonder where he is. Probably out checking traps. We should wait for him, take whatever he has got worth taking." This from a tall, lean man with a scar across his cheek. The third man, heavy-set and mean-eyed, laughed. "Look at this. He has got women's clothes here. Think our hermit has himself a woman." Clara's blood ran cold. She was reaching for her pistol when she heard a voice like thunder. "Get away from her things." Porter emerged from the trees, and Clara had never seen him look like this. He was fury incarnate, his muscles tensed, his eyes blazing with protective rage. He had his rifle in his hands, and he looked more than capable of using it. The 3 men spun around, hands going to their guns, but Porter was faster. He fired a shot into the ground at their feet. "Next one goes higher. Mount up and ride out, now." The scarred man's hand hovered near his pistol. 3 against 1, friend. Maybe you should think about those odds." "The odds are just fine by me." Porter's voice was deadly calm. "But if you want to try your luck, go ahead. I promise at least 2 of you will not ride away from here." There was a long, tense moment. Then the heavy-set man backed toward his horse. "Come on, this is not worth it." The other 2 followed reluctantly, mounting up and riding away, though the scarred man looked back with an expression that promised this was not over. Porter did not lower his rifle until they were completely out of sight. Then he turned, his eyes scanning the rocks until he found Clara. "You can come out now." She emerged on shaking legs. "How did you know I was there?" "I did not, but I hoped you had the sense to hide." He set the rifle down and came to her, his large hands gentle as they gripped her shoulders. "Are you all right? Did they see you?" "I am fine." "You came back just in time." Clara found herself leaning into his solid warmth, her fear draining away now that he was here. Porter pulled her into an embrace, and Clara let herself be held, feeling safer than she had ever felt in her life. His heart was pounding against her ear, and she realized he had been just as frightened as she had been, but frightened for her. "I should not have left you alone," he said roughly. "If they had found you, but they did not. You protected me." Clara pulled back to look up at him, seeing the concern etched on his face. "Thank you, Porter." Something shifted between them in that moment. Porter's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin with infinite tenderness. "Clara, he stopped himself, stepping back. "We should pack up. Those men might come back with friends. I know another place we can go, deeper in the mountains. It is more remote, but safer." They worked quickly to gather everything essential. Porter moved with efficient speed, loading their supplies and weapons. Within an hour, they were mounted and riding into the hills as the sun began to set. The new camp was indeed more remote, nestled high in the mountains in a small valley surrounded by pines. There was a cabin here, small but solid, with a stone fireplace and wooden shutters on the windows. "Built this a few years back as a winter shelter," Porter explained as he unlocked the door. "Figured I might need it someday." The cabin was sparse but clean. There was a rope bed in one corner, a table and 2 chairs, shelves for supplies and little else. But after weeks of sleeping in a lean-to, it seemed luxurious to Clara. "You take the bed," Porter said, already rolling out his blankets on the floor. "Porter, this is your cabin. I cannot—" "Yes, you can and you will." His tone was gentle but firm. "I have slept on worse than a cabin floor, believe me." They settled in as night fell. Porter built a fire in the fireplace while Clara prepared a simple supper from their supplies. As they ate, she noticed him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "What is it?" she asked. Porter set down his plate. "Clara, I need to say something. These past few weeks with you here, they have been the best of my life. I know you are planning to move on to California eventually, and I understand that. But I want you to know that you can stay here as long as you want. Not as someone working off a debt, but as someone who is wanted here. By me." Clara's breath caught. "Porter, you do not have to say anything," he continued quickly. "I just needed you to know. You are not alone anymore, Clara. Whatever you are running from, whatever demons chase you, you do not have to face them by yourself." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. "You do not know what you are saying. If you knew about me, about my past, then tell me." Porter moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his much larger ones. "Tell me everything. Let me help carry whatever burden you have been carrying alone." Clara looked into his eyes, those kind blue eyes that had shown her nothing but respect and care, and she felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. "I was a teacher in Santa Fe," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I worked for a wealthy family, tutoring their children. The father, her voice broke, and Porter squeezed her hands encouragingly. "He was a cruel man. He drank, and when he drank, he became violent. His wife and children were terrified of him. One night, I heard him beating his eldest daughter. She was only 14, and I could hear her screaming. I could not just stand by. I went to the room and I struck him with a fireplace poker to make him stop." Porter's expression darkened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "He turned on me then, took his belt to me, beat me until I could not stand. The scars on my back," Clara's voice broke entirely now, tears streaming down her face. "They are hideous, Porter, long welts that never healed properly. After that night, I could not stay. The family paid me to leave quietly to avoid scandal, but the scars remained, and I could not bear people seeing them, pitying me, whispering about me." She was sobbing now, years of pain and shame pouring out. Porter pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she cried against his broad chest. "Shh," he murmured, stroking her hair. "You are safe now. That monster cannot hurt you anymore." "But the scars are proof of your courage and strength," Porter said firmly. He pulled back to look at her, cupping her tear-stained face in his hands. You stood up to a violent man to protect a child. You survived something terrible. Those scars do not make you less beautiful, Clara. They make you more so because they show what you are made of. You cannot mean that, Clara whispered. You have not seen them. I do not need to see them to know that they do not change how I feel about you. Porter's thumbs wiped away her tears. But if you want to show me, if you need me to see so that you can believe that I mean what I say, then I am here. I will not look away or be disgusted. I promise you that. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then, with trembling hands, she stood and turned her back to him. Will you help me with the buttons? Porter's hands were steady and gentle as he unbuttoned the back of her dress. She wore a chemise beneath, and she pulled it forward, exposing her back to the firelight. She heard Porter's sharp intake of breath and braced herself for the inevitable reaction, for him to turn away or make excuses to leave. Instead, she felt his fingertips, gentle as a whisper, trace the first of the scars. Clara, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Then she felt something that made her gasp, his lips pressing softly against one of the scars. Porter kissed another scar, then another, his lips moving across her back with infinite tenderness. Beautiful, he murmured between kisses. You are so beautiful, Clara, every part of you. Tears were streaming down Clara's face again, but these were different tears. Porter kissed every scar, taking his time, treating each mark of her pain with reverence and care. When he had kissed the last one, he helped her pull her chemise back up and gently turned her to face him. You believe me now? He asked softly. Clara could only nod, too overcome with emotion to speak. Porter pulled her into his arms again, and she clung to him, feeling something inside her that had been broken begin to heal. I am falling in love with you, Clara Owens, Porter said into her hair. I have been since the day I found you by that broken wagon. And if you will have me, I want you to stay here. Not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as my wife. Build a life with me here in these mountains. Clara pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt or pity. She found only love and absolute certainty. You truly mean it. Every word. I know it is fast, but out here, life is different. When you know something is right, you do not wait around. So I am asking you, Clara. Will you marry me? Clara thought about the life she had been running toward, alone and uncertain. Then she thought about the life Porter was offering, here in these mountains with a man who looked at her scars and called her beautiful, who had protected her and cared for her, who saw her for who she truly was and loved her anyway. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Porter, I will marry you. Porter let out a whoop of joy that echoed through the valley and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. When he set her down, he kissed her, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble completely. She was home. The next morning they rode to Val Verde together. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with storefronts and a church at the far end. Porter led her straight to the church, where they found the minister tending his small garden. Reverend Matthews, Porter called out, I need you to perform a wedding. The Reverend, a kindly man in his 50s, looked up in surprise. Porter Dalton, I have not seen you in town in months, and who is this lovely lady? This is Clara Owens, and she has agreed to be my wife. Can you marry us today? Reverend Matthews studied them both, then smiled. I can, but you will need witnesses. Let me fetch my wife and daughter. The ceremony was simple but perfect. Clara wore a new dress that they purchased from the general store, a simple blue calico that matched Porter's eyes. Reverend Matthews' wife lent her a bouquet of wildflowers. They stood before the altar in the small church, and Clara felt Porter's hand, large and warm and steady, holding hers as they spoke their vows. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Porter kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. They were married. She was Clara Dalton now, and she had never been happier. They spent their wedding night at the small boarding house in Val Verde, in a room with clean sheets and a real mattress. Porter was gentle with her, patient and loving, treating her as though she were made of precious glass. When he finally saw all of her scars in the lamplight, he kissed each one again, murmuring words of love and devotion. Clara had never imagined that intimacy could be like this, could be tender and loving instead of violent and frightening. In Porter's arms, she felt cherished and safe. They made love slowly, learning each other, and afterward, Clara lay curled against his broad chest, listening to his heartbeat and feeling completely at peace. "I love you, Mrs. Dalton," Porter murmured into her hair. "I love you too," Clara whispered back, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They stayed in Val Verde for a few days, purchasing supplies for their mountain home. Clara bought fabric and sewing notions, seeds for a garden, books to read during the long winter evenings. Porter bought tools and ammunition, practical things they would need. But he also surprised her with gifts: a beautiful shawl, a silver hairbrush, a journal for writing. "You should not spend money on such things," Clara protested, though she was touched by his thoughtfulness. "My wife deserves beautiful things," Porter said simply. "Besides, I have been saving my trapping money for years with nothing to spend it on. Let me spoil you a little." On their last day in town, they were loading their supplies when Clara heard whispers from across the street. Two women were staring at them, their heads together in conversation. Clara caught the words "mountain man" and saw them looking at her with curiosity and something else, pity. Porter noticed too and stepped close to her, his hand settling possessively on the small of her back. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "Their opinions do not matter." But that evening, as they were having supper at the boarding house, the landlady, Mrs. Henderson, pulled Clara aside. "Pardon me, dear, but I feel I should warn you," the older woman said in a low voice. "I've heard things about you. About scars on your back. People are talking." Clara felt her blood run cold. "Who told you that?" "Those men who came through town a few days ago, the rough-looking ones. They claimed they saw you at Porter Dalton's camp, said they saw scars when you were washing clothes." "I do not mean to pry, dear, but people are whispering that maybe you are running from the law or that you are damaged goods." Anger surged through Clara. "Those men did not see anything. They are liars spreading vicious rumors, and even if I do have scars, that is my business and no one else's." Mrs. Henderson looked taken aback by Clara's vehemence. "I meant no offense, dear. I was just gossiping," Clara finished. "Please excuse me." She returned to Porter and told him what had happened. His jaw clenched, and she saw that dangerous look come into his eyes. "Those three from the camp. They are trying to cause trouble." "Let them talk," Clara said, though her hands were shaking. "You said their opinions do not matter." "They do not." Porter took her hands. "But if this is going to follow you, if people are going to whisper and stare, maybe we should address it head on. Show them that you have nothing to be ashamed of." "What do you mean?" "Come with me." Porter led her downstairs to the common room, where several of the boarding house guests were gathered. He stood in the center of the room, and his sheer presence commanded attention. The conversations died down as people turned to look. "I know some of you have heard rumors about my wife," Porter said, his voice carrying clearly. "Let me tell you the truth. Clara does have scars on her back. She got them defending a child from a violent man. She is one of the bravest, strongest women I have ever met, and those scars are nothing to be ashamed of. They are marks of courage and honor. Anyone who says otherwise will answer to me." The room was silent. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she stood tall beside her husband, drawing strength from his unwavering support. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her face flushed. "Mr. Dalton, I apologize for listening to gossip. Mrs. Dalton, You have my deepest respect. What you did was heroic." One by one, the other guests murmured their agreement. The tension in the room eased and Clara felt something release in her chest. These were strangers, but they were looking at her with respect, not pity or disgust. That night, as they lay in bed, Clara traced the muscles of Porter's chest. "Thank you for defending me." "Always," Porter promised. "I will always defend you, Clara. You are my wife, my partner, my love. No one gets to make you feel less than the remarkable woman you are." They returned to their mountain home the next day, and Clara threw herself into making it truly theirs. She planted a garden near the cabin, using the seeds she had bought. She sewed curtains for the windows and cushions for the chairs. She organized Porter's furs and trapping supplies, creating a more efficient system. Porter built her a proper chicken coop and surprised her with 4 hens he traded for in town. He expanded the cabin, adding a small room that could serve as a parlor. He cut firewood for the winter and repaired the roof. They worked side by side, building a life together. As summer turned to fall, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Porter one evening as they sat by the fire, his arm around her shoulders. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Porter's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, wonder, and finally, fierce protectiveness. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." He pulled her into his lap, holding her carefully as though she might break. "A baby, our baby." His large hand splayed across her still flat stomach. "I am going to be a father." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Porter kissed her deeply, then pulled back. "We need to prepare. I will need to stock more supplies, get more firewood, make sure we have everything you and the baby will need. Maybe we should go to Val Verde, be closer to the doctor when your time comes." Clara laughed and put her finger over his lips. "We have time, Porter. I am only a few months along. But yes, when it gets closer, we can go to town if you want." Porter became even more protective than before, if that was possible. He fussed over her constantly, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work too hard. Clara found it endearing, even when it became excessive. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," she told him one day when he tried to stop her from gathering eggs. "I know, but I cannot help it. You and this baby are the most precious things in the world to me." Porter placed his hand over hers on her growing belly. "I just want you both safe." Winter came early to the mountains that year. By November, snow was falling regularly, blanketing their valley in white. Clara loved the beauty of it, the quiet peace of the winter landscape. She spent her days reading, sewing baby clothes, and cooking hearty meals to keep them warm. Porter went out every day to check his trap lines and hunt. He always returned before dark, stamping snow from his boots and bringing her whatever he had caught. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, Porter's hand on her growing belly, feeling the baby kick. "I think it is a boy," Porter said one night. "He kicks like a mule." "Could be a girl," Clara countered. "Girls can be strong too." "True, you are proof of that." Porter kissed her temple. "Boy or girl, this child is going to be loved beyond measure." As Clara's pregnancy advanced, Porter insisted they go to Val Verde to be near the doctor. They made the journey in early March when Clara was 8 months along. The trip took 2 days, with Porter stopping frequently to let her rest. He had fashioned a comfortable seat for her on his gentlest horse and led the animal himself, unwilling to risk her falling. They took rooms at the boarding house again, and Mrs. Henderson welcomed them warmly. The landlady had become an ally, defending Clara against any whispers that arose. She helped Clara prepare for the birth, sharing wisdom from her own experiences as a mother. The baby came on a rainy night in early April. Clara's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Porter, pacing outside the room, thought he might go mad with worry. But finally, just before dawn, he heard the strong cry of his child. Dr. Morris opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Dalton. A big, healthy boy, and your wife is doing well." Porter rushed into the room. Clara lay propped up on pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she whispered. Porter approached almost reverently and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. His son had a shock of dark hair and his eyes were closed, his little fists waving in the air. He was perfect. "Can I hold him?" Porter asked, his voice rough with emotion. Clara placed the baby in his large hands, and Porter cradled his son with a gentleness that belied his size. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your papa, and I promise you I will always protect you and your mama. You will grow up knowing love and safety. You will never know the kind of cruelty that marked your mother or the loneliness that marked me. You will be loved always." The baby opened his eyes, and Porter could have sworn his son looked right at him. His heart felt so full it might burst. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. They had discussed names during the pregnancy, but had not settled on one. Porter looked at his wife, at this brave, beautiful woman who had given him everything, and then at his son, this perfect new life they had created together. "Paul," he said. "Paul Dalton. It means small, but I have a feeling he will grow up to be anything but." Clara smiled. "Paul Dalton. I love it." They stayed in Val Verde for a month, letting Clara recover her strength before making the journey back to the mountains. Porter was attentive to both mother and child, changing diapers, walking the floor with Paul when he cried at night, bringing Clara meals in bed. The townspeople of Val Verde had fully embraced them now. Families brought gifts for the baby, women stopped by with advice and hand-me-down clothes. Clara found herself making friends, real friends who knew her story and respected her anyway. One afternoon, Clara was sitting in the boarding house parlor with Paul sleeping in her arms when the scarred man from the camp entered with two others. Her blood went cold as recognition hit. These were the men who had accosted them, who had spread the rumors about her scars. The scarred man saw her and stopped, his expression unreadable. Clara stood, holding Paul protectively, ready to call for help, but the man surprised her by removing his hat. "Mrs. Dalton, I owe you an apology." Clara stared at him. "I heard what your husband said about your scars, about how you got them defending a child." The man looked uncomfortable but sincere. "I had no right to spread stories about you. That was wrong. I wanted you to know that I am sorry, and I have been setting the record straight wherever I can." Clara did not know what to say. Finally, she managed, "Thank you, I accept your apology." The man nodded and left, and Clara sank back into her chair, her heart pounding. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her elbow. "Are you all right, dear?" "I think so. I just never expected him to apologize." "People can surprise you sometimes," Mrs. Henderson said. "And I think having Porter Dalton defend you so fiercely made folks think twice about crossing either of you. Your husband has a reputation as a fair man, but also as someone you do not want to tangle with." Clara smiled at that. Porter was indeed both of those things. When they finally returned to their mountain home in May, Clara felt like she was truly coming home. The valley was green with spring growth, wildflowers blooming in profusion. Her garden had survived the winter under its blanket of snow, and new shoots were already pushing through the soil. Life settled into a new rhythm with baby Paul. Porter proved to be a devoted father, spending hours with his son, talking to him, showing him the mountains, teaching him even though Paul was far too young to understand. Clara would watch them together and feel her heart overflow with love. "You are wonderful with him," she told Porter one afternoon as he held Paul against his broad chest, the baby looking tiny against his father's size. "I never thought I would have this," Porter admitted. "A family, love. I thought I would spend my life alone in these mountains. Then you came along and changed everything." As Paul grew, the cabin echoed with his laughter. He was a happy baby, curious and strong. Porter built him a cradle from smooth pine wood, and Clara sewed soft blankets and tiny clothes. They had so little in terms of material wealth, but they were rich in the things that mattered. When Paul was 6 months old, a early snow came to the mountains. Clara woke to find the world transformed, blanketed in white. Paul was fascinated by the snow, reaching for the flakes that fell past the window. "Should we take him outside?" Clara asked Porter. "Just for a moment so he can feel it." Porter bundled Paul in layers of blankets until only his little face showed, and they stepped outside. Paul's eyes went wide as snowflakes landed on his cheeks. He laughed, a sound like silver bells, and both Porter and Clara laughed with him. "First snow," Porter said, kissing his son's forehead. "One of many you will see growing up here, little man." That winter was hard, with heavy snows and bitter cold. But inside the cabin they were warm and safe. Porter made sure they had plenty of firewood and supplies. Clara cooked and baked, filling the cabin with good smells. Paul grew strong and healthy, reaching his milestones right on time. On their first wedding anniversary, Porter surprised Clara with a gift. He had been working on it in secret, he explained, whenever she was busy with Paul. It was a rocking chair, beautifully made from smooth wood with her name carved into the back. "For you to rock our children in," he said. "This one and any others we might have." Clara ran her fingers over the carving, tears in her eyes. "It is beautiful. You made this." "I am not good with words like you are, with all your reading and learning. But I can work with my hands, and I wanted to make you something that showed how much you mean to me." Clara kissed him. "I love it, and I love you more than words can say." "Even your fancy book words," Porter teased gently. "Even those are not sufficient." Clara settled into the rocking chair, pulling him down to kiss him again. "You have given me everything I never dared to dream of. A home, a family, love that does not hurt. You see me, all of me, scars and all, and you love me anyway." "Not anyway," Porter corrected, kneeling beside the chair. "I love you because of all of you, including the scars. They are part of your story, part of what made you the woman you are, and that woman is everything to me." As the years passed, their family grew. 2 years after Paul, they had a daughter they named Catherine, a tiny thing with Clara's eyes and Porter's determination. Then came another son, Peter, who was quiet and thoughtful. And finally, another daughter, Charlotte, who arrived screaming into the world and rarely stopped making noise. Their cabin grew too, with Porter adding rooms as needed. He built a proper barn for their animals, which now included not just horses but a milk cow, goats, and more chickens. Clara's garden expanded every year, providing vegetables and herbs that she canned for the winter. The children grew up wild and free in the mountains, learning to track and hunt from their father, to read and write from their mother. Porter taught them respect for the land and its creatures, to take only what they needed, to be honest and fair. Clara taught them literature and history, math and science from the books she ordered through the general store in Val Verde. They made the trip to Val Verde several times a year, and the children loved it. They had friends in town, and the community had fully embraced the Dalton family. Clara's story was known, and she was respected for her courage and strength. The scars that had once been a source of shame became a symbol of survival and bravery. One day, when Paul was 10, he asked Clara about them. She was getting dressed and did not realize he had come into the room until she heard his gasp. "Mama, "What are those marks on your back?" Clara turned, pulling her dress closed. Porter, who was also in the room, came to stand beside her. "Those are scars, son," he said gently. "From a long time ago, before you were born." "How did Mama get them?" Paul's eyes were wide with concern. Clara knelt down to his level. "I got them protecting someone who needed help. A bad man was hurting a little girl and I stopped him. He hurt me for it, but I would do it again because it was the right thing to do." Paul processed this, his young face serious. Then he surprised her by hugging her fiercely. "You are the bravest person I know, Mama." Clara held her son close, tears in her eyes. Over his head, she met Porter's gaze and saw the love and pride shining there. Later, she told Paul the fuller story, age-appropriate but honest. She wanted her children to know that doing the right thing sometimes came with a cost, but it was still worth doing. She wanted them to stand up for those who could not stand up for themselves. All 4 children took that lesson to heart in their own ways. Paul grew up to be a lawman, dedicated to protecting the innocent. Catherine became a teacher, helping children who came from difficult circumstances. Peter became a doctor, healing those in need. And Charlotte, fierce Charlotte, became an advocate for women and children escaping violence. But all of that was years in the future. For now, Clara and Porter focused on raising their children with love and teaching them to be good people. Porter never stopped being amazed by his family. Some mornings he would wake early and just watch Clara sleep, this woman who had trusted him with her heart and her scars. He would check on his children, seeing them curled in their beds, safe and warm. And he would feel such overwhelming gratitude that he had been given this life. Clara felt the same wonder. She had come to these mountains broken and afraid, hiding from her past, convinced she was damaged and unlovable. Porter had shown her the truth that her scars did not define her, that she was worthy of love, that she could have the family and home she had always dreamed of. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they left the children with friends in Val Verde and returned to the valley where Porter had first brought her, where his original camp had been. They rode up to the spot where the lean-to had stood, now long gone but the memories still vivid. "I knew I loved you even then," Porter said, dismounting and helping Clara down. "That first night watching you by the fire, listening to you talk, I knew you were special. I was so afraid," Clara remembered, "of you, of everything. I had forgotten what it felt like to trust someone. And now—" Porter pulled her into his arms. "Now I cannot imagine my life without you. You are my partner, my love, my home." Clara reached up to touch his bearded face. "You took a woman everyone else saw as broken and showed her she was whole. You kissed my scars and called me beautiful. You gave me a life I never dared to dream of." Porter kissed her, deep and sweet. "You gave me the same, Clara. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me how to truly live, how to love, how to be part of something bigger than myself. You are my everything." They made love there under the stars, in the place where their story had truly begun. And afterward, lying in Porter's arms with the sounds of the night around them, Clara felt complete. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and milestones. The children grew tall and strong, each of them inheriting the best qualities of both parents. The cabin became a home filled with love and laughter, a place where people were always welcome. Porter's reputation as an honorable man spread throughout the territory. People sought his advice on matters large and small. He became a mediator in disputes, known for his fairness and wisdom. But he never forgot where he came from, never lost the humble gratitude for the family he had been blessed with. Clara became known as a healer and teacher. People came from miles around seeking her knowledge of herbs and medicine, or asking her to teach their children to read. She never turned anyone away, remembering her own struggles and determined to help however she could. On their 20th anniversary, all 4 children, now grown, gathered at the mountain cabin to celebrate with them. They brought spouses and grandchildren, filling the expanded homestead with noise and activity. Porter and Clara stood on the porch, watching their family, and marveled at the life they had built. 20 years, Clara said softly. It has gone by so fast. Best 20 years of my life, Porter replied, his arm around her waist, and I am looking forward to the next 20. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the children were putting the grandchildren to bed, Paul approached his parents. "Mama, Papa, we have something for you," he said. He gestured, and his siblings gathered around along with their spouses. Catherine stepped forward holding a large package wrapped in cloth. "We all worked together on this. It is a way to say thank you for everything you have given us." Porter unwrapped the package to reveal a large painting. It showed the mountain valley, their cabin nestled among the trees, with all of them together as a family. But what made Clara gasp was the detail in the background: wildflowers she had planted, the rocking chair Porter had made, the children at various ages playing in the yard. It was their life, their love, captured in beautiful detail. "This is incredible," Porter said, his voice thick with emotion. "Who painted this?" "An artist in Santa Fe," Peter explained. "We described our memories to him, and he created this based on our descriptions. We wanted you to have something that showed the life you built, the family you created." Clara was crying openly now, happy tears streaming down her face. She hugged each of her children in turn, then stood back to admire the painting with Porter's arm around her. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Thank you, all of you." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Porter and Clara sat in their room looking at the painting by lamplight. "We did all right, did we not?" Porter said softly. "Raised some good people. We did better than all right. We created a legacy of love and strength." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day you found me by my broken wagon? How different our lives could have been if you had ridden past?" "I think about it sometimes," Porter admitted. "But I believe we were meant to find each other. Call it fate or God's plan or whatever you like, but I think you were always meant to be mine, and I was always meant to be yours." Clara turned to look at him, this man who had loved her so completely, so unconditionally. His hair was more gray now than brown, lines etched around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still her Porter, still strong and protective and kind. "Kiss me," she said. Porter did, with all the love and passion of their 20 years together. And later, as they lay together in the darkness, Clara traced the familiar contours of his face. "I love you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing past my scars to the person I really am." "I love you too," Porter replied. "And I will keep saying it until my last breath. Those scars are beautiful because they are part of you, and everything about you is beautiful to me." More years passed. They saw their children marry and have children of their own. They became great-grandparents, a blessing neither of them had expected. They grew old together in their mountain home, their love deepening with each passing season. Porter's body, while still strong, began to show the wear of a life lived hard. His joints ached in the cold, and he moved a bit slower than he once had. But his mind was sharp, and his love for Clara never diminished. Clara's hair turned silver, and her face gained lines, but Porter still told her every day that she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and he meant it. To him, she was forever the brave woman he had found in the desert, the one who had trusted him with her broken pieces and let him love her whole. On their 40th anniversary, they were too old to make the journey back to that first valley. Instead, they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Their children and grandchildren had visited earlier, bringing gifts and good wishes, but now it was just the two of them. 40 years, Clara marveled. That is a lifetime. The best lifetime I could have asked for, Porter said. He took her hand, his large fingers intertwining with her smaller ones. You know, people used to whisper about you, about your scars. They thought you were broken or damaged. I wish they could see you now, could see the incredible life you have lived, the family you have raised, the people you have helped. You are a testament to the strength of the human spirit. We both are, Clara corrected. You could have stayed alone in these mountains, bitter and isolated. Instead, you opened your heart to a wounded stranger. You showed me that love does not have to hurt, that trust can be earned and kept. You gave me everything. They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, as the stars began to appear. The night air was cool and sweet, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers from Clara's garden. You remember what you said to me that first time you saw my scars? Clara asked softly. I called you beautiful, Porter replied immediately, and I kissed every one of them. You cannot imagine what that meant to me. I had been so ashamed, so convinced that I was ruined, and you looked at the worst parts of me and saw beauty. That was the moment I knew I could love you, that it was safe to love you. Porter brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. Those scars told me who you really were, a woman willing to sacrifice herself to protect the innocent. How could I see them as anything but marks of honor? They talked late into the night, reminiscing about their years together, about the children and grandchildren, about the life they had built. They laughed over funny memories and got misty-eyed over poignant ones. And when they finally went inside to bed, they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had for 40 years. Porter passed away peacefully in his sleep 5 years later, at the age of 73. He simply did not wake up one morning, his heart having given out after a life well lived. Clara, lying beside him, knew the moment he left. She held him close and cried, mourning the loss of her great love. The funeral brought people from across the territory. Everyone who had known Porter came to pay their respects, the families he had helped, the people he had mediated for, the children he had taught to track and hunt. They all had stories of his kindness, his strength, his unwavering integrity. But it was Clara's eulogy that moved everyone to tears. My husband was the best man I have ever known, she said, standing tall despite her grief. He found me when I was broken and lost, and he loved me back to wholeness. He saw beauty where others saw only scars. He built a life with me here in these mountains, raised 4 incredible children, and touched countless lives with his goodness. I am grateful beyond measure for every day I was blessed to be his wife. He was my partner, my protector, my love. And though he is gone from this world, he will live on in our children, in our grandchildren, in everyone whose life he touched. After the funeral, the family gathered at the cabin. Clara sat in the rocking chair Porter had made her all those years ago, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. They shared memories of Porter, laughed and cried together, and took comfort in each other. What will you do now, Mama? Catherine asked gently. You cannot stay up here alone. Clara looked around the cabin at the life she and Porter had built together. Every item held a memory. The rocking chair where she had nursed all 4 babies, the table Porter had built with his own hands, the painting of their family hanging on the wall, the shelves full of books they had read together on long winter nights. This is my home, she said firmly. I am not leaving. Your father and I built this life together, and I will honor his memory by continuing to live it. Her children knew better than to argue when their mother used that tone. Instead, they made sure she had everything she needed, took turns visiting her regularly, and accepted that Clara Dalton would live out her days in the mountains she and Porter had loved. Clara lived for another 12 years, staying active and engaged despite her age. She continued her work with herbs and healing, taught her great-grandchildren to read, and kept her garden flourishing. She often talked to Porter as though he were still there, telling him about the children and grandchildren, about the changing seasons, about how much she missed him. On the anniversary of their first meeting each year, she would ride out to the spot where her wagon had broken down all those years ago. She would stand there, remembering the fear she had felt, the desperation. And then she would remember Porter riding up, this massive, gentle man who had changed everything. "You saved my life that day," she would say to the wind, to his spirit, to wherever he was. Not just from the desert, but from a life half lived in fear and shame. "You gave me courage and love and a family beyond my wildest dreams. Thank you, my darling. Thank you for everything." Clara passed away in her sleep at the age of 87 in the cabin she and Porter had built, in the bed they had shared for so many years. Her children found her the next morning, peaceful and still, a slight smile on her face. On the table beside the bed was a journal, open to the last entry she had written. "I am ready now. I have lived a full and beautiful life, surrounded by love. I have seen my children grow into wonderful people, my grandchildren start families of their own, my great-grandchildren take their first steps. I have done what I set out to do. I have loved and been loved in return. And now I am ready to see my Porter again, to be in his arms once more." To anyone who reads this, know that love is real, that healing is possible, that scars do not define you. I was broken once, but I was loved back together. And that love sustained me for a lifetime. Thank you, Porter, for 45 beautiful years together. I am coming home to you now. The funeral was held on a beautiful spring day, with wildflowers blooming across the mountains. Clara was buried next to Porter, in a plot overlooking the valley they had loved. The headstone read, "Clara Dalton, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother." She turned scars into strength and pain into purpose. Deeply loved, never forgotten. At the funeral, Paul, now a grandfather himself, stood to speak. "Our mother taught us many things, but the most important lesson was about the transformative power of love. She came to these mountains carrying deep wounds, both physical and emotional. Our father loved those wounds, kissed those scars, and called her beautiful. And in doing so, he showed her and all of us that we are more than our worst moments, more than our deepest hurts. We are defined by how we rise from those hurts, by the love we give and receive, by the legacy we leave behind." And what a legacy our parents left: 4 children, 16 grandchildren, 32 great-grandchildren, and more on the way. A family built on love, respect, and unwavering commitment to doing what is right. We will miss them both terribly, but we celebrate the incredible lives they lived and the love story that inspired us all. As the family gathered after the service, they looked through Clara's journals, finding decades of entries detailing her life with Porter. The entries were beautiful and heartbreaking, funny and poignant, a record of a love that had endured through hardship and joy, through raising children and growing old together. One entry, from shortly after they were married, stood out. Catherine read it aloud to the assembled family, her voice thick with emotion. "Today Porter and I were in Val Verde, and I overheard some women whispering. 'She has got scars all over her back,' one said, her voice pitying. Before I could respond, Porter stepped forward. He looked at those women and said, 'Yes, she does. And I have kissed every one of them and called her beautiful, because that is what she is. Those scars are proof of her courage, her strength, her willingness to sacrifice herself for others. I am honored that she chose me, that she trusted me with her heart. And anyone who thinks those scars make her less than perfect can answer to me. I have never loved him more than I did in that moment. He is my champion, my love, my everything." There was not a dry eye in the room. This was the love story that had shaped their family, that had shown them what true partnership looked like. Porter and Clara had built something beautiful together, something that would endure long after they were gone. Years later, the cabin in the mountains became a gathering place for the Dalton family. They kept it maintained, taking turns staying there, making sure the garden continued to bloom. It became a symbol of their heritage, a reminder of where they came from and the values their grandparents had instilled. The painting the children had commissioned hung in the main room, and beneath it was a brass plaque that read, "Porter and Clara Dalton. He saw beauty where others saw scars. She found home where others saw wilderness." Together they built a legacy of love that endures through the generations. The story of Porter and Clara became family legend, passed down from generation to generation. Great-great-grandchildren who never knew them personally still grew up hearing about the mountain man who kissed every scar and called his wife beautiful, about the brave woman who had protected a child and then found healing in the arms of a gentle giant. Their story became a touchstone, a reminder that love can heal even the deepest wounds, that scars do not define us, that home is not a place but a person. It reminded the family that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs us something. It showed them that real strength lies in gentleness, that protection comes from respect, that true beauty is found in character, not appearance. And in the mountains of New Mexico, in a small valley where wildflowers still bloom each spring, two headstones stand side by side, marking the resting place of a love that transcended time, pain, and circumstance. A love that started with a broken wagon wheel and a chance encounter, and grew into something that would inspire generations. Porter and Clara Dalton had found each other against all odds, had loved each other through everything life threw at them, and had built a legacy that would never be forgotten. They had proven that the deepest scars can become the most beautiful parts of our story when viewed through the eyes of love. And somewhere, perhaps in those mountains they loved so well, their spirits rest together, finally reunited, forever entwined. The mountain man and his scarred bride, whose love story became legend, whose legacy lived on in the hearts of all who knew them or heard their tale. Their story ended not with tragedy but with triumph, the triumph of love over fear, of healing over hurt, of beauty found in the most unexpected places. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. And in the end, that is all any of us can hope to do. The mountains still stand, eternal and unchanging. The valley still blooms with wildflowers each spring. The cabin still shelters generations of Daltons who come to connect with their heritage. And the love story of Porter and Clara continues to inspire, to encourage, to remind us all that our scars do not define us, love does.